Welcome to the setup manual for the HiPod Lite LX series. This is the manual for HiPod Lite towers which started shipping in April of 2018. Begin by taking the tower out of the case and placing it on the ground. For those HiPod Lite users who purchased before April of 2018, your manual can be found on the page where this manual is posted on the HiPod website. For the latest generation of the HiPod Lite, the leg setup has been greatly simplified. You'll find two black knobs pushing against the core tower in the base of the legs. Once you have adjusted the slats of the legs to be as even or parallel to the ground as possible, tighten the knobs so that they hold the legs in place. This way, nothing will slip while you're operating. The next step is to apply the sandbags, and this is not an option. You must apply the sandbags, but what you fill them with is up to you. We don't recommend sand as that can be a mess. Rocks, bricks, gravel, or something of your discretion is preferable, but you must use the sandbags for safety. The last part of the setup in the base and the legs I want to bring your attention to is the knob on the leg itself. This is an adjustable leg in case you find yourself on uneven ground. Now we're going to set up the top of the unit. Take the HiPod head, shown here, and insert into the mounting pedestal at the top of the tubes. Close the ratchet as shown to lock it in place. The core structure of the new HiPod Lite has been completely redesigned. This is something new. There's a collar about halfway up with a ratchet. If you open that ratchet, you can spin the tower 360, and if you close it, it will lock it in place. Also note the white line which says mount above this line. That is going to be important in the next step. There are two main parts which mount above that white line and below the first tube collar. The first is the LCD bracket, which you can see here. Take the bracket and with the mounting clamp, put it right below the first collar on the tube. You can see the mounting approach as such. On the opposite side of the bracket, there is a ratchet which you can open to adjust the angle of attack the LCD bracket sits at. You can adjust this at any point within the range of motion. Now the next step in the process will be to attach the HiPod handle, but before we get there I want to bring something to your attention. Notice how the ropes coming down from the head are on the left side of where you've put the LCD bracket and where the collars are facing forward. When the handle is put on, it will be on the left side and you want the cords to match up on the same side so nothing gets tangled. You'll see how this works in the next segment. Just make sure that the head is coming down with the cords on the left side of the unit. Now we're going to mount the handle itself. Again, look at the white line and mount above that point. Take the clamps of the handle and adjust them like this, close them with the big X on the side, and it will hold in place. Make sure that the entire assembly is above that white line. You can see in these images that if it is mounted lower, you're going to have parts of the handle bump into the collar in the middle of the tower. Mounting above the white line prevents this from happening and is important to take into account during setup. Now it's time to connect the HiPod head to the HiPod handle. Again, note how the cords coming down from the head are on the same side as the yellow portion on the HiPod handle. This is where the cords from the handle are going to come out and connect. Now at the bottom of the HiPod handle where there's a silver pin, you will see two nylon cords attached to carabiners. Pull on one and then from the bottom, connect it to a cord coming from the HiPod head. For the second cord, take it in the opposite direction around the bottom of the HiPod handle. You can see how it connects and then can pull out of the handle in this way. The pulley function is controlled when you turn the wheeled handle, which then turns the wheeled head up top. If you have the cords coming out from the top of the HiPod handle without going around the bottom, it will not function. Now it's time to explain the function of the two silver pins or screws on the HiPod handle. For the one on the bottom where the cords are coming out, if you open that screw, you can pull the cords out farther, which is used when the tower is elevating into the air. When you have it at the height you want to pull those cords back down and tighten that pin. That prevents the cords from slipping further and gives you tight control over the motion. For the silver pin that's facing forward, that's the position lock screw. If you have it tightened, you can't move the handle, which allows you to lock off a shot. If you open that pin again, you can move the handle in any direction that you like. Now in 2019, all clients will receive a new style remote, and I wanted to familiarize you with the physical characteristics. You'll receive this remote mounting bracket pre-attached to your handle. It will allow you to move the handle and the tower in all directions. This stays permanently attached, and you take the remote, shown here, and simply slide it onto this mounting apparatus via the groove in the back. It will click into place. On the side, you'll see a button which says press to release, which allows the remote to be disconnected from this mounting bracket. You'll want to take the remote off and store it separately each time for safety, but leave the mounting bracket on the handle for ease of use. Now we're going to attach the LCD to the bracket. Note the position of the bracket itself, find the screen from your case as shown here, and note that there's a slot in the screen on the back at the very bottom middle. That's what you're going to use to mount the LCD to the bracket directly. Once mounted, take the screw right behind the LCD and attach it firmly to the back of the screen. This will hold it in place, and here's another view of that same motion. One final note regarding the ratchets on the LCD bracket. To change the angle of attack, you first need to open those ratchets and then change how the screen is facing you. Don't just simply push the screen because you'll hurt the track in the back. Open up the ratchet, change the position, and then lock it so that it holds where you like it. The same will apply for the longer extension that is from the base clamp of the LCD bracket up to where the LCD mounting spud is. Make sure to always open and close the ratchets in this way. Now we're going to attach power to the screen. Find the LCD battery, which looks like this. There's Velcro on the back, and just stick it to the back of the screen. There's a power converter cable that goes between the battery and the screen. It looks like this. You're going to plug the round end into the DC port on the screen, and then on the opposite side, you'll connect the USB cord to the battery itself. Look for the higher of the voltage out ports on the battery. You can see the same motion from two different angles in this portion of the video. Again, this is for the screen connection, and then on the opposite side to the USB port on the battery. Once connected to power, your screen will either automatically turn on, or you'll see a red power light, which you'll need to click the button to turn on the screen. Now we're going to start connecting the cables for the unit. This is the set of cables for the LX series. You'll see there are items pre-attached. This is a strain relief and quick release for the camera. It protects the cables under the camera while in use. This is the Lite cable with the yellow tag that controls camera zoom and record functions. Also, you'll see an HDMI micro cable which plugs directly to the camera, and then at the bottom, HDMI standard for your LCD, and the white cable is the Lite, which controls remote zoom and record functions, which plugs into the remote. All of these are put together for ease of use and also so you don't have to worry about applying these each time. This again is the strain relief and quick release plate. Notice the lever that you'll need to open and close to allow the camera to snap in and out. The HDMI cable will come out of one side of this plate, and the Lite cable, which controls zoom and record functions, will come out of the opposite side of the plate. I'll show you how to attach that in the following section. Use the threaded hole shown in this image to attach the strain relief plate to the HiPod head. You'll need to put the plate onto the HiPod head with the cables facing the right directions. The HDMI cable will need to be on the left side of the plate, and the Lite cable for zoom and record control will be on the right side. You'll see it has a yellow tag. Also, again, note the lever that will be in the back of the plate. You'll connect with one of the brass screws that's attached to the HiPod head. Typically, you use the groove for the HiPod head that's on the very outside of the head. This is a view of the bottom of the strain relief plate before setup. Note where the holes are being used and how the brass screw is going to connect. Now put the plate with cables on top of the HiPod head and bring the brass screw up and into the threaded hole from the bottom of the HiPod head. This will sandwich it together. There's a secondary screw which you'll then need to bring up after the primary screw has been connected as fully as possible. The secondary screw is what cinches the plate in place so it can't move afterwards. Just be aware there are two sections of this. Now again, since this is a new remote for 2019, I'm going to revisit the connection and continue to the cables. Take the remote as shown here, line up with the groove in the back to connect to the mounting bracket pre-attached to your handle. It'll connect like this, and you can take it off again with the button on the side which says press to release. You'll see later in this manual we demonstrate setup for the 2018 version of the remote, but it's completely different, and each year prior to that has shipped different remotes as well. This is the 2019 version. Now you'll see we've created a white plastic casing around the tip of the Lite cable which plugs into the remote. I'm taking it off for demonstration, but please don't do this as it's permanently attached. I just want to make you aware that it exists. This plastic casing keeps the cable tip from wiggling inside of the remote when connected. This will prevent damage to either the cable tip or the port in the remote itself. Now you know that part exists and also its function. You can see that it prevents wiggle inside of the remote this way. Above that point, you'll see there is a small extra strain relief that's attached to the mounting bracket for the remote. Take this and slide the black portion of the cable into it, and then adjust so that it's the best position to keep the cable lined up to where the cable plugs in to the remote. Now I want to talk about how to adjust the angle of attack on the remote in regards to how it's connected to the handle itself. You can see the range of motion that you will use this handle in while filming. If you're doing an end zone shot, you're going to need to turn it pretty high from bottom to top so that you can have the camera turned down. Now on the back you can see the screws where you can manually adjust the physical connection, but it's much easier to change this with the ropes. Once you have the tower in the air, leave the silver pin open where the ropes come out of the handle at the bottom. Then, by adjusting how much slack is either in front or behind of the handle by pulling the ropes in and out, you can adjust the default point at which the remote will sit. This is a much easier way to adjust the angle of the remote on the handle rather than going all the way to the physical adjustment using a tool and screws on the back. But we'll show that in a second. Once you have the angle of attack the way you want it, you will need to lock that silver pin at the bottom so it holds the position for you. Otherwise, it'll slip back to the original point. Now, if you want to adjust the physical connection of the remote bracket to the handle, see the two screws on the back of the bracket itself. Then you will need to source an Allen key, metric, and then open these screws so that you can turn the bracket how you like it. Close again to finish. This is the only part of the HiPod you'd need to source a tool for, otherwise adjust with the ropes. Now I'm going to review the 2018 remote setup. Now we're going to connect the remote. We've designed a brand new strain relief which encases the remote in place so the cable can't wiggle where it connects to the port on the remote. This will preserve the cable much longer as no wiggle or wobble can damage the port or cable. Notice a brass screw underneath of this strain relief plate, and there's also a small little silver pin at the very top. You can see it again from this perspective. You'll need to line up the silver pin at the top of the hole, and then there's a bottom hole where the brass screw will fit. This is how you connect the remote with strain relief plate to the HiPod handle itself. See another view from the brass screw here, and then the remote's connected. The remote itself has a light on it now, which shows green when it's not recording and red when it is recording. This is a really nice feature which removes the need to apply text on screen information, but we will show how to set that up later in this video, just in case you want to. Also, although not required, it's advisable to loop the remote cable around the silver portion of the handle a few times. Now we are going to begin to set up the camera. I'm going to bring your attention to the quick release plate, which is set in the open position, ready to accept the camera. On the camera itself, you'll have a little spud at the bottom that's ready to connect to this mounting mechanism. Also, just note that all technical information regarding menus and camera setup will be included at the end of this video. Take the camera, have the lever open on the quick release, and snap into place. This connects the two pieces together. Now, when it's time to take the camera off, simply open the lever again, and the camera will come out. There are two little levers on that quick release, so just make sure that they're moving together. Snap back in and we're ready to connect the cables. Open the camera's LCD window where you will access the HDMI port. You will need to leave that window open for the entire time you're filming to keep the camera on. Inside you'll see the HDMI port next to where the SD card plugs in. Take the HDMI cable and plug it into the port. Note how we've relieved the strain with the plates. On the opposite side, near where there's a USB cord in the handle strap, you'll find a little door that says multi. Plug the Lite cable into that port. It's the cord with the yellow tag attached. Here's a view of the Lite cable from the opposite side of the camera. And then from the reverse angle, here's the HDMI cable. Now on the spud where the head connected to the top of the HiPod tubes, you'll find a hook. There's also a carabiner physically attached to your cables, and take the carabiner and attach it to the hook. This acts as a secondary strain relief. There's also a piece of Velcro. Wind it around the top spud a few times to keep it clean and out of the way. There are two types of LCDs, one that only has HDMI in and another with HDMI loop-through. I'm showing the loop-through screen, which is an upgrade in this video. You'll have 3 ports, 2 for HDMI in and 1 for HDMI back out. Otherwise, you'll have 2 ports for HDMI in only with the default screen. To connect the video signal, find your standard HDMI cable and plug it into the top HDMI in for HDMI 1. Otherwise, you'll have to cycle through the screen options for HDMI 2. Now we're going to set up the camera battery. There are two ways to do this, and I'll explain both approaches. For the first style, we're going to attach the battery directly to the camera plate from the bottom. To do so, take the brass screw, the second one that's on the head, and there's a third in your overall case for the tower, and then sandwich the battery to the plate so that it's hanging down from the bottom. This has the benefit of keeping all of the cables neat, which I'll show in a moment, but it does add a little bit more weight to the head. So depending on your preference, you might want to mount it here or to the spot we'll go over next. The cable you will use to connect the camera to the battery itself looks like this. It's a female USB to a male USB adapter. Find the small USB cord coming out of the camera from the hand strap and plug the female end of the adapter into that cable. Run the cable over to the battery using the male end of the USB to connect to the battery. You may need to click the battery to activate it and turn it on so it begins to provide power. Now this next section is regarding cable management. You will have all of this extra slack with the battery adapter, and you're going to want to take that up and hold it inside of the camera's hand strap. Open up the Velcro, wind it up a few times, and then just Velcro it shut. This helps to keep the cables neat and out of the way so you won't have the cables catching at any point on the unit. More broadly, cable management is one of the most important parts of operating and owning a HiPod. Regardless of what cable system you're using, old SD cables, the current HDMIs, or something special, you need to make sure that the camera with the head on top can move in all directions without anything yanking or tugging at any point in the motion. This is critical to protecting your electronics long term. Now, the cables are naturally going to try and pull down when you elevate the camera with cables connected into the air. Without the strain reliefs we've designed, you'll cause damage on the cable tips, bending the cables eventually, or you can actually widen the port in the camera, which there is no way to fix. If you ever replace your cables, you must thread them back through the strain reliefs, whether they be for the remote or for the camera connectors. Also, how you treat the cables before and after a filming session can make all the difference. Banging them around, knocking into things, stepping on the cables needs to be avoided at all costs. Proper cable management can literally make the difference between a functional or a non-functional system on game day. Now let's move on to the second way to mount the battery for the camera. With this approach, you'll mount the battery through the hook where you put the carabiner holding the cables earlier. Again, find a brass screw, insert the screw through the hook, and then attach the battery through the adapter. You'll have a connection which looks like this. It's a little tight, but you can do it. Just make sure the battery is not interfering with the way that the cables for the head to the handle need to operate. Now, this is why this method is not my favorite. Note how many cables need to be managed when the head moves. You have another cable which is going to be moving from a different connection point between the battery and the camera. You're going to need to make sure that these cables are organized in a way where they're not going to catch at any point. There's just more to manage with this approach, and because there are more variables, it is my lesser recommended option. However, it does take the weight of the battery off the plate, and for some people that makes a big difference. So it is a preference situation, but you need to be aware of all the variables involved if using the approach where you put the battery on the tubes of the tower itself. Now, when using the rain gear, it's best to mount the battery under the camera just for maximum coverage. To mount the rain gear for the camera, you'll put the plate on which that rain gear sits directly under the strain relief plate where you mounted the camera. Just sandwich them together and then insert the brass screw to hold them on. Pull the rain gear itself over the camera and cover everything until satisfied. Then cinch the cord up on the other side so that everything is tight and covered, no rain can get in. It'll look like this when you're done. The rain gear for the LCD is fairly self-explanatory. Just cover the screen and that will do the job. Same for the remote. You just mount the rain gear for the remote over the top of the unit and then control from on top with your hand. Now that the tower is set up, I'm going to go over some important things you should know about your camera. Now, if you want the camera's text and record data to show on the LCD while you're recording, follow these steps. From the default screen, hit the menu button and then select Camera Mic in the top middle. It'll bounce you into a scroll window and then look for Scene Selection. Your display will change to look like this. Then on the far right, you'll see an arrow on the bottom. Go ahead and click on that and leave your screen here. You'll see Standby, which turns into Record, and Battery Life. Each time you turn the camera on, you'll need to set this up. Now, to program your camera so it won't auto turn off after a few minutes, you'll do this. Go to Setup, and then scroll down until you see something that either says Power Save or Eco Mode, and then go ahead and click into that, and then turn Power Save or Eco Mode off. It varies based on which model you have. Also, if you see an option which says Demo Mode, you'll want to go into that and turn it off as well. Continuing with camera settings, this is something you're going to need to do at first time setup only. New cameras shipping in 2017 have an automatic dual video record setting activated in the camera. What this does is to record 2 files of the same clip in 2 different formats. What that does effectively is to take up twice as much memory in your SD card as it needs to. So to turn this off, this is what you need to do. Go to Menu, and then after that point, click on the top right icon that says Image Quality / Size. Then scroll down to where you find Dual Video Record option and make sure that option is turned off. That will save you this extra file space and allow you to record longer at a time. One final note for those of you who are using the USB power pack style camera battery, to confirm the correct battery is powering your camera, once you have text on screen set up as explained earlier in this manual, look at your screen, and if in the top right hand corner you see a battery icon, either dead or partly charged or anything at all that shows a battery, that means you're drawing power from the small internal battery in the camera. You need to click the external power pack battery on the side once connected for it to take over as the main battery for the camera. Otherwise, if you use the internal battery, that camera will die within 30 to 45 minutes. Once you have clicked the external battery and it is turned on, the battery icon on the LCD will disappear. This is what you want, and it confirms the larger battery is active as the power source for the camera. One quick note before we put the tower in the air, there's a leveling bubble on the HiPod head where the camera sits, and you want that to be right in the center so your horizon line is even. That can make the difference between a shot that looks like this or like this. Now that the tower is fully assembled, it's time to elevate the tubes. Note the cables for the head and the handle coming up and down the unit, and also the 2 cables for the camera, both video and link. Make sure all of these are organized and nothing catches on the way up or down. Now, every tube section has a collar with a cam lock. Open the cam lock, push the tube above the collar up into the air to your desired height, and lock the cam lock again. Each stage has a piece of Velcro. Take your video and link cables and put it inside of the Velcro and lock it down. This helps to keep it out of the way and also acts as a strain relief. When it's time to put your tower away, here's a quick tip. When you want to fold the legs, always pull up on the top portion of the legs and push your foot down on one of the black slats so that they compress in. That's going to allow the legs to collapse easily. And that's it.